Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, most CEOs have had a very hard time answering one of the most important questions in business, which is, how are we going to meet, beat, or miss revenue? Why? Well, after more than 1 trillion spent on things like ERP, CRM, and business intelligence, spreadsheets, and collaboration software, actually, there isn't an enterprise approach to revenue. There is no way for a joined-up approach for revenue-critical people, processes, and systems to work together. Everything's fragmented, disjointed, and people are working in silos. Now, Andy Byrne recently appeared on my radar after putting a deck on LinkedIn detailing his recommendations for how companies can thrive during the downturn. And Andy believes that most companies only have half a strategy during tough economic times because they're focusing too much on cutting costs, when in fact, it should be about both costs, control, and controlling revenue. So with all that in mind, I invited him to talk about revenue leak and how tech can solve the problem. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way stateside, where Andy is going to join us on the podcast today, share his story, and also talk about all things revenue leak. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Andy. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Andy Byrne. I am the founder and CEO of Clari. Clari helps CEOs and CROs drive more efficiency, growth, and predictability across their end-to-end revenue process. And we help CEOs answer the most important question in business. Will they meet, beat, or miss on revenue?
And it is one of the most important questions in business. I'm looking forward to expanding on that in a few moments. But before we do, I want to take you back in time for a moment. Can you remember where your passion for tech came from, or the moment that put you on this path that you're on today, and ultimately share your origin story with us?
Sure. Let's see. I guess I would say that my passion for tech, my passion for building companies, I think is distilled down into one sentence, which is I love to create something from nothing.
Yeah.
And the power of that, of having an idea that solves a massive problem for large populations and using technology to transform how people work and to change lives. I think back in the early days, I was a salesperson that was selling technology, and I just fell in love with the engineers and what they were building and what they were solving. And I just got super curious and spent a lot of time with engineers that were building new software. And that curiosity led to me wanting to start companies and build relationships with the true artists that are building this software. And I've been at it ever since for about 30 years now.
Wow, fantastic. And fast forward to 2022, and I'm conscious people will be hearing about you and what you're doing here for the very first time. So can you just tell the listeners a little bit more about the problems that you help businesses solve? I mean, you hinted at a few moments ago, is one of the biggest problems of CEOs, what they're looking for or what they're looking for a solution for. But can you just expand on that for me?
Sure. So I guess metaphorically, the way we think about the current situation right now, when we started Clari way back when, is the R in CRM and the R in ERP is not revenue. Mm-hmm. And, revenue is the most important business process in any company on the planet, yet there was no enterprise system that allowed customers to run their revenue like a process and drive more efficiency, growth, and predictability across their end-to-end revenue process. So we saw that there's this massive opportunity, the biggest opportunity in my career, hiding in plain sight. And we thought, let's go solve for that and help customers realize their fullest potential by transforming their revenue process. And what happened was, historically customers thought about revenue as just an outcome, but they started to, after working with Clari, they started to realize they could run it, they could control it, and they could drive more revenue precision end to end, which is allowing them to have the full capture of revenue, both predictably and repeatedly across their funnel.
And before you came on the podcast today, I was doing a little bit of research on you and Clari and the problems that you solve, etc. And one of the things that stood out for me when I was reading that was for every $1 of revenue leak, it equates to over $9 lost in equity value. So just to set the scene, I guess, can you define exactly what a revenue leak is?
Sure. Revenue leak is the loss of revenue due to breakdowns in the revenue process. So for the listeners, if you think about revenue as a funnel, at the top of the funnel, you have hundreds of thousands of targets. Those targets turn into leads. Those leads turn into opportunities. As we go down the funnel, those opportunities lead to closed business. Now, there is leak happening in every step of that funnel, yet CEOs and CROs have no idea where that leak is occurring and how they can solve for that leak and move from what we call revenue leak to revenue precision. As a matter of fact, we did a survey that showed across the last 12 months, customers across the survey of 2,000 prospects, that they were leaking $2.1 trillion worth of revenue. Now, what is leak? Let's think about that. And let's just go into some specifics. At the top, you've got targets that never get touched. You got leads that go stale. You've got opportunities that get lost to the competition. You have committed business where the rep realized that, too late, that they didn't have any budget. So these are all examples of revenue leak that is actually huge potential for us to capture and move a customer from revenue leak to what we call revenue precision, which is that full capture of revenue predictably and repeatedly across their end-to-end revenue process.
And as this is a tech podcast, the question I've got to ask is how are you being able to, or how are you leveraging technology to help stop revenue leak?
Sure. So this is where I feel like it's been the biggest opportunity hiding in plain sight for companies, is the ability for the CROs and CEOs to instrument for the first time their end-to-end revenue process, an instrument from the prospecting customer to the rep all the way up, and think about everything that's happening all the way up to the boardroom. So having that full instrumentation that allows them to see exactly what's going on. And what we found is that, it's not just in sales. Up to 50% of the employees in some of our customers, Neil, are revenue critical employees. They're outside of sales. They're in pre-sales and marketing. They're in post-sales and finance. And these are revenue critical employees that have this insatiable appetite to collaborate around revenue to allow them to run revenue. So when you give them one system to all collaborate, they can run revenue like a process. And then secondly, using a platform to allow the executive suite to be able to govern and control revenue, allowing them to know exactly what's going on, seeing all of the areas of leak, being able to see that ahead of time and predict accurately where you're going to land in the future and know, are you going to meet, beat, or miss on revenue? So that's instrumentation that allows them to see everything that's going on and allowing them to have a new enterprise software application that allows reps to close deals faster, allows managers to drive more revenue, allows execs to boost the predictability and accuracy of forecasts, allows them marketing to drive more high quality pipeline, and allows the post-sales net dollar retention motion to drive more upsell, cross-sell, and drive less churn over time. All of that equals having the enterprise realize their fullest potential around what we call revenue collaboration and governance.
And there's so much uncertainty in the world at the moment. And when I was researching it, I did come across it was a deck on LinkedIn, which was detailing your recommendations for companies. For anyone that's not seen that, can you tell the listeners a little bit more about that deck and maybe also where they can get hold of that too?
Absolutely. So we can actually send a link out to this deck. It's been crazy how viral it's been across the internet. What I'd say is, if I think about the conversations I'm having with CEOs today in the current uncertainty and macro environment, and how is it different from other downturns that I've been involved in, whether it's the great financial crisis or the dot-com. In the past, CEOs were really focused on cutting costs. Now, the conversations are very different. They're about cutting costs and also being able to shore up, protect their revenue. So it's cost and revenue. And what we found is that in some of these bigger companies, it takes a long time to kind of move the battleship to cut cost and be able to look at, headcount, et cetera. And, these CEOs, they're looking at their revenue critical employees as not liabilities. They're looking at them as assets, and how can they use them to realize their fullest potential and be able to drive more efficiency and more growth in a more effective way in this environment. So I think, that's a big sea change in how CEOs are thinking about the strategy for getting through the downturn. And this deck walks through the approach that these CEOs are taking. And we're seeing a lot of our customers are not just surviving, they're thriving. They're actually beating expectations in these down markets right now because they've implemented a revenue collaboration and governance approach to how they run the company.
And I also came across a commission study conducted by Forrester Consulting, which was on behalf of Clari. And that found that companies that deploy the Clari revenue platform to their revenue critical employees can actually achieve something like a 448% return on investment. It sounds incredible, but I'm curious, do you have any examples of how you made something like this happen?
Yeah, I'll give you a specific example, actually, of a company that brought on a CEO. They were doing about $5 billion in revenue. That CEO, brand new, comes in and was super frustrated. He's in week 6 or week 8, and the data that was coming to him, he couldn't really get a handle on what was happening with revenue, what was happening with deals that were moving, and why they weren't able to make their number. He then brought in Clari, and we fully instrumented everything that was happening. And within a couple of days, we were able to showcase 2 broad things that were happening. One was we were able to showcase a massive amount of slip deals that were happening at the end of the quarter that they were not sure that was happening. They were not aware that was happening. And we could correlate it down to the fact that their reps and their enablement of how they closed those deals and the sequence of events that they ran actually was being poorly executed at scale. And we were able to see that incredibly quickly. That allowed them to change the way they enable those reps. And then the previous quarter, the quarter thereafter, we saw a reduction in their slip rates by 25%. That allowed them to capture that revenue. So that's example 1. Example 2 is that they had acquired a company, and they were struggling with getting not just the pipeline that was created, but getting to close this wonderful new area of revenue that they were going to count on for growth. As we were utilizing the conversational intelligence data and looking at, hey, what was happening? What were the reps doing? How were the customers actually coming back and reacting to the engagement of the sales teams? We realized the new sales reps that were trying to sell these new products were actually not only were they not effective, but they weren't even trying to sell the products at all. So that allowed us to quickly zoom in, find an area where there was an opportunity to shore up that leak. And that drove an 8% increase in their revenue capture for this new product that drove their net dollar retention from 125 to 130%. So these are great examples of using revenue collaboration and governance in our platform of how you can drive that ROI. And, if I zoom out a little bit, over the last 12 months, as we look at our data from Clari Labs coming from our customer base, we see that while in this downturn, we've seen, a lot of companies that are struggling. On average, our customer base, they increased their win rates by 24%. They retained their revenue capture by almost 40%. They increased it by 40%. And their forecast accuracy was increased by 96% in week 2. So these are quantifiable return on investment metrics that our customers are experiencing based on the investment in revenue collaboration and governance.
And it certainly seems that you're incredibly busy at the moment, because another thing that highlighted to me when I was doing the research was that you've recently unveiled the revenue collaboration and governance acquisition of Wingman. So can you expand on that, what it means for both Clari and, of course, your customers?
Yeah, so in this market, we're seeing a lot of momentum. And of course, with the momentum, you have the ability to look at expanding the platform. We talked to customers over the last couple of years about conversational intelligence and what they were lacking. And we realized that there was an opportunity to bring conversational intelligence into the revenue collaboration and governance framework that we design and we enable for customers. And Wingman was a company that we were super excited about. It's our second acquisition. We have more on the way. And we're just very impressed with how we can bring in these insights that allow us to actually bring that into every single workflow that we offer for customers. So combining conversational intelligence, taking that signal that allows us to not just do a record and playback, but to be able to take CI data and use it and aggregate it into insights that allow up the hierarchy, whether you're a first line manager, a regional director, a geo lead, all the way up to the CRO, and use that to help you predict where you're going to land and understand, are you going to meet, beat, or miss on revenue? Conversational intelligence plays a very, very important role. And we love the acquisition. It's actually exceeding all of our expectations in terms of revenue growth and pipeline. So, very excited about the acquisition and more to come on that front.
Incredibly cool. And the big question I've got to ask, as you're so busy and achieving so much right now, is where do you go from here and what excites you about the future?
Well, as I mentioned, we feel like this is the biggest opportunity hiding in plain sight for customers.
Yeah.
I'll say this again. Revenue is the most important business process in the company. If you zoom out, Neil, the current systems that they're using to run revenue are literally 3 decades old, right? CRM, Excel, BI, it's a mess and it's crazy. And so, I think for the listeners to understand, for people that are revenue professionals, whether you're in sales, marketing, post-sales, finance, pre-sales, whatever it might be, the ability to actually transform how you run revenue and to be able to drive the metrics and the value that we mentioned and showcase not only how you drive more efficiency, growth, and predictability, but to be able to accurately predict the future of any dimension of revenue is arguably the most important move, whether you're a CRO, CFO, or CIO, you can make for your company in this environment. And so for us, we're really excited about that, about transforming revenue and helping people run revenue in a way they've never done before.
Fantastic. Well, I wish you the best of luck on that journey, and I'll keep in touch with you, and it'd be great to get you back on in the future and see where that's leading. But we started the podcast today talking about your origin story and your road to success. But of course, none of us are able to achieve any amount of success without a little help and guidance along the way. So just to restore the balance in the universe, is that a particular person that you're grateful towards who possibly helped get you where you are today that we can give a little shout out to?
It's a good question. I guess what I'd say, Neil, is that if I had to call out, it wouldn't be one person, it would be our customers. I started this from scratch, and it was two of us in a garage. And we realized that there is a massive potential to transform how people run revenue. And it's the customers along the way, the early customers, and even our current customers that are pushing us to show that, hey, please get rid of these spreadsheets. My process is broken here. There's so much more that our customers want us to do for them. So I guess the person I'm most grateful for is the customer. And there's so much more we're going to do for them. The ability for us to be able to hear from them and hear them say to us every day, we get feedback saying, you have changed our lives. It's easier to do our jobs. I can accurately predict the future, but there's so much more we're going to do for them, Neil. So my shout out is to our customers who have been pushing us. Thank you. There's more to do, more greatness to come from Clari.
Fantastic. Love that answer. And for anyone listening that wants to dig a little bit deeper on anything we've discussed today, or even continue the conversation by chatting with your team, what's the best starting point for everything?
Yeah, best starting point is to hit our website and look at the product demos at clari.com.
Excellent. Well, I'll add the links to that to show notes so people can find you nice and easy. I'll also include a link to the deck that we were talking about as well. And so much I love chatting with you about today, especially as, yes, we're living in kind of dark economic times at the moment, but many businesses are focusing too much on cutting costs, where in fact they should be both about cost control and controlling revenue. And that is the one that's been hiding in plain sight, as you said. So thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story and the solution to that very real problem.
Neil, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
I don't know about you, but I learned so much today about revenue leak, and I am the first to admit that this is not my area of expertise. So you've heard from me today, you've heard from today's guest, but I want you to enter the conversation now. Tell me your thoughts, experiences, insights, whatever it might be, and we'll keep this conversation going. But that's it for today, so keep those messages coming over to techblogwriteroutlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. We've had over 2,000 interviews, and we've got so many more booked in. I think I've got 100 interviews booked in between now and October, so we've got a lot coming your way. But a big thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.